each and every
We're live in the Tammy Moore trial. I have criminal defense attorney Saam Zangeneh here to discuss this case. Now, we're watching the defense closing arguments, and there's a lot of focus on what the prosecution does not have, as opposed to the evidence that the prosecution presented. Do you think that's a good strategy in this particular case?
Hey, good afternoon. Pleasure to be back again. You know, sometimes you have to deal with what you have. You have to play the hand that you're dealt, so to speak. And in a lot of criminal cases, in my experience, you have to go to the strength of your case. And the strength in this case, from this defense attorney's standpoint, not me, is the lack of evidence that they have. And it's obviously something that's probably mandated on that jurisdiction's jury instructions, where they tell jurors what the conclusion of the case. The judge says you can make a determination on the type of evidence by what the evidence is and or the lack of evidence. So that's a play that this lawyer's taking. I don't know if I would have gone as strongly as he did, but it's something you can play with.
Certainly a lot of focus on that standard we all know, beyond a reasonable doubt. So more to come from the defense in their closing arguments. Right now we do have to go to a break, but make sure to stick with us. There's more to this trial. So now we're hearing the prosecutor's rebuttal, and no surprise there. We're hearing, hey, look, there is plenty of evidence. Look at this time frame. By the way, there was 48 hours before law enforcement became involved, giving plenty of time for evidence to be destroyed. Saam, let's bring you back in, because I'm wondering if the prosecution isn't filling in some of those gaps we were talking about before. Obviously, the defense focus was on what the prosecution didn't have, and now the prosecution's really telling their story again. Do you think this is effective to the jury?
So, let me tell you what I think. I think that the prosecution should have focused on Tammy Moore's testimony, because I think that in conjunction, because what do they have? They have a circumstantial case, okay? And so when you have a circumstantial case, you're asking for the jury to connect the dots. And if I hear this fire hydrant example one more time, I'm going to lose my mind, because I've been hearing it since I was a first-year prosecutor 20 years ago. This prosecutor should have come up with something less antiquated, so to speak. But I would have gone with Tammy's testimony. I would have said, listen, test her credibility, because she took the stand, and you're going to hear it out of the horse's mouth. And remember how I asked her question X, and remember how I asked her questions Y, and it didn't add up. And looked at her demeanor on the stand. That's what I would have focused on. I would have focused on attacking the strength of their case, because she kind of fell into a little bit of a pitfall. The defense attorney set her up with like the softball, and it kind of caused to make, like you said, potentially strengthen the defense's case just a smidge.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam. I think that her testimony was the most detrimental to her case. And as a prosecutor, I would have focused on that really, really hard with respect to credibility and just her demeanor in general. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we do have to go to a break. Stick with us, because we'll be covering this trial for the rest of the day. We've been live in the Tammy Moore trial all day, covering the closings. The court has now ended for the day, going through jury instructions. The closing arguments are completed. We are keeping an eye on that courtroom to see what happens next. In the meantime, let's take a look at what's going on around the country.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime. Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Authorities in Louisiana linked a death row inmate in Texas to a 19-year-old cold case murder thanks to advancements in DNA technology. The victim, 19-year-old Casey Federer, was found dead from a gunshot wound in her Park Boulevard apartment in September of 1999. A glove was left in the apartment, and Baton Rouge authorities were recently able to link it to 49-year-old Travis Green, a death row inmate in Texas. Green was convicted and sentenced to death in 2001 for the rape and murder of another 19-year-old woman just 2 weeks before Federer's killing. Green now faces charges of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. An officer in Florida is coming under fire after video surfaced of the officer punching a 14-year-old girl on her side while she was down on the ground. Authorities were responding to a call of a group of teens allegedly harassing customers at the Coral Square Mall in Coral Springs. The teens were banned from the mall, but returned and continued to harass customers, allegedly pushing over a 5-year-old girl before police intervened.
Why you hitting her? She can't do it! She can't do that! Her head's underneath her!
The Coral Springs Police Department defended its officers' actions as appropriate use of force. The unidentified teen now faces 3 separate charges. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Those are today's top crimes, and something that I do want to address a little further with our defense attorney, Saam, who's been with us this afternoon. Let's talk about this case out of Coral Springs. Saam, you're in Florida, correct? So you're familiar with this video, and you've been following this case. I will say, my first glance at this video, this looks pretty disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a South Florida native. I've been here in South Florida for 20 years. I started off my legal career as a prosecutor here in Miami-Dade County. So the way that these situations unfold is that when you see a situation akin to what we have in front of us, the storyline for law enforcement is you didn't see what prompted this situation. That's what they always say, okay? And so we don't know what happened prior to this. You see this young lady down in a position where you can't see where her arms are. They're alleging that she wouldn't release her arms to put her arms behind her back, and they're striking her. And is it okay? Absolutely not. But they're going to justify it by saying that she was unruly and aggressive and that her actions resulted in these actions.
Yeah, well, certainly this video leaves the public wanting answers to the questions that you just described, because on its face, this video looks like your classic overuse of force type of case, especially when dealing with a young girl. But we're going to come back to you for follow-up on that, Saam, because I'm sure you're following it there in Florida. Right now, we're going to dive back into the Tammy Moorer case. This is her testimony on the stand, exactly what Saam and I were speaking about before. Take a look and see what you think. Did her testimony actually help or hurt her case? Take a look. We're having a little bit of an issue with that clip, but we are going to revisit this testimony. But right now, I want to bring Saam back in to talk a little bit about the defendant's testimony. So, in my view, her aggressive nature and the sparring with the prosecutor, I don't think that helped her case at all. I felt that the defense attorney did a pretty good job wrapping everything up in a very respectful way. You know, going after the prosecution, going after the case, but not crossing that line. This crossed the line to me and almost feeds into those personality characteristics that the prosecution was trying to show. What was your take on it?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, some of the things that you heard in this trial, things that they accused Tammy of doing are pretty outrageous, like over the top. And so when you hear these statements and then you see her actions, it kind of gives credibility that this woman is capable of doing things that are unheard of. Which is in essence what the prosecution is alleging that she did.
Certainly, because that's what this is based on, right? If you believe Tammy as a juror, if you believe her story that she told on the stand, then you have to acquit. But if there's a question mark there, and sometimes credibility in circumstantial cases, that's the factor that teeters the jury over the edge. That's what really what makes them hold on to something. And it's not often you hear from the defendant in a case.
Well, listen, let me tell you, I've had jurors come up to me after trials all the time. And they give you their input, and a lot of times what they tell you is, so-and-so's testimony really took me over the edge, whether it's the victim, the defendant, God forbid I ever put a defendant on the stand. I don't know what this guy was thinking, because he seemed like a pretty seasoned defense attorney, but to allow, what kind of show I want to call it. It starts with an S and it ends with a hit, but I'm not going to say the word. But that kind of show took place, and it was not a good one.
Right, and who knows what happened? I mean, I know that we've all had clients that you prep and you prep and you prep, and then the minute you go on the stand, it goes off the rails. Maybe that was the circumstance, but I agree with you, Saam. Stick around, because I want to break this down with you even further. We are going to throw to a clip. This is Tammy Moorer's testimony. Take a look, and then we'll break it down. More of the cross-examination of Tammy Moorer. Is she digging a hole that she can't get out of? Saam, you've been with us. You've been reviewing these clips of Tammy Moorer's testimony. We heard the closing arguments. This case is now going to the jury. What do you make of it? What's your prediction?
Well, I'll tell you, there's some problems with the prosecution's case. obviously. And the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Do I think that Tammy Moore helped herself when she testified? No. But she did do certain things which I thought were positive in terms of somebody testifying. She made constant eye contact with the jury. And if she was able to use that mechanism, because a lot of times when you're looking at someone in their eyes, it really kind of sways a jury. When you're a strong witness, which she clearly was in terms of her position, like they didn't really shake her. She was confrontational, she was aggressive, but I don't think they really shook her that much. But I don't think she helped her case.
Yeah, I mean, just that aggressive nature, I think, feeds into the prosecution's theory of the case. But hey, look, circumstantial cases are not impossible, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And so I think that ultimately she was detrimental to her defense case. But there's some real problems with the prosecution's case. And I think that it's going to be a toss-up. I mean, listen, if I was a juror, I'd probably acquit her.
Well, that's interesting, and I think that's what we're all listening for, right? Will there be a hung jury? Will there be an acquittal? There certainly are some holes from the prosecution's perspective, but they focused on this timeline. And we know that that was such a cornerstone of their case because the prosecutor had that timeline behind her while giving her entire closing argument. What do you think? Do you think that helps to show that the way that the events unfolded according to the prosecution?
I mean, listen, we had an Associate Justice, Associate Justice Kavanaugh take out his calendar from 1982 and help him get...
That was a surprise, I must say. I'm not that organized, but some of us are.
You know, but listen, you know, what the prosecution's doing and what I think Ms. Moore was trying to do when she was like debunking the timeline with regards to how they were pinging her phone, I mean, it's not...
Yeah. Saam, you know what? Thank you so much. We really appreciated your insights. We do have to go to a break, but make sure to stick around with my friend Aaron Keller for the Daily Debrief. Thanks again.